what happens? Organizations still have this concept of the dumb user. You know, people are stupid. Huh? Well, actually, you know what? They're not. You know, when was the last time someone from Amazon or Tesco came round your house and said, look, actually, I'm terribly sorry, we've had to change the interface, and before you use it, we thought you might like to go on this little training course. It doesn't happen. Now, I'm sure we might bitch and moan, and we've changed it, and it's moved from here to here. But as individuals, we suck it up and we get on with it. So why then, when we come into the office in the morning and we cross that threshold, does all of that change? Why does the organization treat me like an idiot? And why do I think, as the IT guy, oh God, we're going to make a change to the finance system. Right, so we're going to need 3 weeks of training. We're going to have to do an internal marketing. No, come on. We don't need to do that anymore to the same extent, because people broadly are used to using technology in an innovative way in their personal lives. How many of your organizations block Facebook or Twitter at the firewall? A large proportion of you. That's really interesting to me, because it's a bit to what Matt was talking about. Do you remember when the internet first arrived, or the web more particularly, and there was only one terminal in the office that had internet access? Oh, wow, can I have a go? You know, how would your businesses run today if that was the case? I'm probably guessing that they wouldn't run today. Social media is going to be the same. Social media, to me, represents as big a change to the internet as the web did. If you think about it, how many customers of yours exist on Facebook and Twitter? If you think that over half the people connected to the internet, some 500 million people, are on Facebook. And if your organization blocks that stuff at the firewall, you're saying a number of things. First thing you're saying, actually, there's this big proportion of our audience that, frankly, I just don't want to listen to. Secondly, why are you really doing that? Now, the IT guys amongst you will say, oh, it's security. Yeah, we don't like that stuff. Well, the reality is more about it's a management issue. Certainly, and I always feel like I used to do a lot of work with charity. I used to do a lot of work in the public sector. It's probably about the same thing these days. But, and it's a management issue for them because they don't trust people. If we allow Facebook and Twitter, you'll just waste your time. Well, if you take that view, you better frisk people for newspapers and Sudoku books when they come in the office. You know, ban the water cooler. What you're saying is that if I've employed you as a professional, I don't trust you to be professional in the way that you do your job. These tools are really important. They change collaboration, they change your relationship with the customer. And if as an organization you block that, you really are going to struggle to stay engaged both with your internal audience, but equally with your external audience. And on the internal audience point, the real issue there is if you've got somebody who's using that stuff and is good at it and really likes it, they're actually engaged with technology. Do you remember the challenge we used to have 10 years ago, or 5 years ago even? We just can't get people to engage with technology. They don't want to use it. We would have killed for something in people's personal lives that we could then use at work to get them engaged in technology and doing the stuff that we need. The world is changing. Technology is changing. In IT, we have to change as a result. The other thing, I've said it before, is if you want to sweep to the assumption that this is all about the kids, you're wrong. Absolutely, fundamentally wrong. Biggest growth in social networking in this country, and in fact globally, is in the older generations. It's not just about kids. If you don't believe me, watch Question Time tonight. Spark up Twitter, put in the Question Time hashtag and see what happens. What you see there is not a bunch of kids talking about, I've just had the world's best latte. We see people engaging with politics, using technology to turn what is a one-dimensional broadcast experience, or in my house, me shouting at the telly, to this two-dimensional, two-way dialogue between a whole bunch of people who care about a particular topic. So these things are starting to come into normal, everyday life for normal human beings like me and you. And so we cannot afford to make the assumption that this is just about young people. This is changing everything that we do. So a lot of what I've said, I think, judging by the reaction, some of you get, some of you think, yeah, he's probably on another planet. Maybe you're right. Just to sort of drive home the point and to show that I've been around a while, I thought it might be useful to sack the juggler at the back, to just take a view about the journey that we've been on in IT. So if we think about back to the 50s and maybe early 60s, the guys in IT were the guys with a white suit, big thick glasses, twinkle in their eye, mainframe in the back room, and it was like they were the only people. This thing was really special. We move into the 70s, and now it's all about data processing, yeah? And you remember this sort of thing, running around with punch cards and all that stuff. And then we move to the 90s, and in the 90s, for people in IT, that was a heyday. That was the time when we were the only people on the planet that knew how technology worked, and more importantly, could translate that into how the business worked. Nobody could touch us, right? We were the people. You couldn't mess with us because we could do it, and nobody had that experience elsewhere because you didn't go home to better computing. You didn't have this experience outside of work. But the problem that we have today is that's no longer the case. How many of you have people coming to you or to your IT people saying, I've got an iPad, make it work at work, please, or an iPhone, or a Windows phone, or a consumer device? I bet a lot of you do. Now, you've got a challenge, you've got a choice about how you deal with that question. The first thing is you can say, well, sorry, mate, you're not going to use that. No, it's insecure. Or you can say, actually, you know what, I can see why you'd want to do that. You can't do it this way, but let me show you how you can. Because if you don't enable people to use that rich consumer experience that they have, two things are going to happen. First is they're going to go and bloody do it anyway, and they're going to do it without your blessing, and they're going to do it in an insecure way that's going to compromise your network and compromise your IT system. And secondly, you're just going to marginalize the role of IT in your organization. If all you, the thing that I worry about, I remember 10 years ago where my arch enemy was like the head of IT security at the organization I worked for. And you know what, the buggers made me share an office with him just for kicks. His definition of a good computer, there was one that was switched off, locked in a box with all the plugs cut off, right? And mine was like, you know, hey, listen, every port should be open, man, because like, you know, we should all be allowed to do what we want. Now, the point that I think IT guys run the risk of being that security guy. No, you can't do that. No, can't do that. No, still can't do that. And it's back to this computer says no stuff. We can't afford to do that because the stuff that we have to offer our business, whether it's through cloud or anything else like that, is really important. And we've got lots of experience. We can really change the way the business works and how successful the business is. But we have to be bold enough to make that leap. So a lot of this is about being confident in how we provide IT service. That's really hard to do because our first reaction is I want to control everything. I want to save you from the really complicated, hard stuff, right? You don't have to worry about it. I'll lock the desktop down so you can't change anything and then you can't get into trouble and it'll be all right. We can't do that anymore because people actually can change stuff. They do that at home and the world doesn't end. Yeah, okay, you know, like anybody in the IT industry, I seem to be the personal support line for anybody in my family and their friends. But the stuff broadly works and it broadly happens, okay? But in IT, you have to take that step, and it's actually a step back. Now, that's not to say that all of this should be a free-for-all and everybody should have the capability to do whatever they want. You need to build a baseline. You need to build a safety net for people. It's a bit like what Microsoft do to Matt and I. Basically, we can have a corporate build if we want, or we can go and build our own machines, put what software we want. The only thing that happens is when I log into the network, we all get stuffed into quarantine until we get checked for the latest patches, latest AV. The other thing that's important, if I choose to do whatever I want on my laptop, is I can still phone the helpline. They won't turn me away. The service level's different, but I still get support. So I'm empowered as an individual to make a choice about how I use technology to do my job. That is a really big change. And I'm not telling you about Microsoft because we're this lovely, really advanced technology company. We've just got a different view on how you manage people and how you encourage them to be successful in what they do. And there are many other organizations doing that. Our challenge remains this really big paradox. If we're in IT, it's on one hand, we actually need to stop telling you how important technology is and how complicated it is. For me, the best technology is the technology that's invisible, the stuff that you don't think about. If you have to spend time thinking about the tool, you're not thinking about the task. But the flip side of that is if I don't tell you that it's important and that it's complicated, you'll cut my funding and you'll do a bunch of stupid things and then you'll have to call me in to clean up after you. So you've got to walk the line. Neither of those extremes is right. It's about striking that balance between commoditization, consumerization. They're the bits that make the difference. Because in summary, the thing that we need to do, you know, if we think about where we are today, the majority of the CIO's time is spent thinking about how do I keep the lights on, how do I do more for less, blah, blah, blah. And if they're lucky, if they're really, really lucky, they'll get a couple of minutes in the shower or when they're walking the dog or whenever it is, when they'll go, how could I change the world? That's just really wrong, and to me that's just phenomenally a wasted resource, even if it's not the CIO about the IT people. Because where we want to be is the operational stuff. You know, that just happens. It's a commodity. I don't really sweat that. What I want to do is I want to get back to empowering the business. I want to change the way that the organization can be successful. Cloud represents the opportunity for us to do that, but it's going to cause us to face some really difficult decisions about how we provide IT to our organizations.
So, thank you, Dave. Where do we find ourselves today? So we did a survey, as I said, first quarter. It consisted of just under 2,000 IT professionals. There was a bit of a Microsoft bias in that they're people who subscribe to TechNet, but as much as anything, it was a fairly, and I've seen the list of job titles, and it went at all sorts of levels. About 300 of the 2,000 were in IT management roles, but it wasn't up to sort of CIO kind of level. Where is your organisation with regard to cloud computing? Mostly either no plans or at discussion. A few people using. And the barriers to adoption, this is almost what you just said, Dave. Data sovereignty and privacy, not to put that down, but as the things that people come out, is integration with existing systems, risk, our existing infrastructure, physical control, regulatory compliance, which is sort of related to the top there. Vendor lock-in's an interesting one, and then not sure. But it's all kind of, dare I say it, kind of computer says no-y stuff. Interestingly, though, I got in touch with a guy I know at Mimecast. He got some research for me. It's reckoned about 40% of UK businesses are using perimeter email security that is effectively cloud. So things like Forefront or Mimecast or Postini, those kind of products. So that doesn't really tally, was maybe because people aren't thinking of that sort of service as being cloud. That's pretty much under the control of the IT department. People here use travel agencies within your businesses? A few nods of heads. We use Amex. Why isn't Amex just seen as a cloud service these days? As a travel service? Because I go in, I book it through a web browser, I do all the transactions, it gets approved, yada, yada, yada. The reason it doesn't get really seen as a cloud service is because other than a bit of single sign-on integration, IT weren't really that involved with the procurement or the payment of that system. It goes through different budget lines. There's a real risk that we see a proliferation of systems and services within organisations where outsourcing of business process as a service, as I heard it described a few weeks ago, but because IT isn't involved in any of the governance, the Amex system doesn't properly integrate with the expenses system, by way of example, because it's the procurement lines are a bit odd. And then at the other extreme, which is completely out of the control of anyone, is the stuff that Dave's been talking about, which is the consumerised services that people are using to do business. LinkedIn, over 100 million people using that now. I don't know if you saw The Apprentice last night. What happens when people don't use consumer cloud services to do business is they make a complete stuff up of it. By way of interesting things that are happening in this world, though, Wise Group, if you go onto the web, I'll put onto my website, onto the blog, I'll put a list of links and stuff. There's a BPOS cloud, using it for collaboration, yada, 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 case study written about Wise Group. Wise Group are a third sector organisation that help people into work. They've been quite adaptive over the years. They started as a company, I think, helping people get better at energy saving. The case study about how they use BPOS is really interesting, but the fascinating thing is that as a result of doing that, now they have set themselves up as a IT consultancy without any IT to help other companies in the third sector to be able to move to cloud computing. That, I think, is really, really profound, because that means that we've got people now in competition with traditional systems integrators who've got an advantage that they really understand the business part, and they don't need to understand the technology part because that's all commoditised out by the cloud providers. Porter's Five Forces helps to explain some of this, but I'll do some stuff on the blog about that in more detail. What is it that IT people are seeing as the most important benefits? It's all the kind of margin stuff. It's IT efficiency, cost saving, ability to grow capacity on demand, hardware cost savings, It's not really about the